We've got another terrific guest with us today as we're getting the chance to bring you a conversation with Carey Jones, who performed, of course, as that badass Wookiee, Black Krrsantan from the Book of Boba Fett. But as interesting as that is, Carey has enjoyed a prolific career as a makeup artist, creature effects, and puppeteer for some of the biggest projects in Hollywood, from The Walking Dead, Watchmen, Lovecraft Country, The Sixth Sense, and so many other great films and TV series. He's an Emmy winner, and he's way too good for this show, but we've conned him into showing up for us here on the Force Geeks podcast. Carey, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here, and I hope that we have a fun conversation, keep this interesting for you. Let's get started. So we need to just get right into it. We're a Star Wars show. We're going to talk about Star Wars, but we also want to get into all the other interesting parts of your career and just kind of how you came to be the person that you are today. So let's get into the Star Wars part first. Were you a Star Wars fan to begin with?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the first movies I saw in the theater was Empire. So yeah, 100%. 100%. Star Wars geek, nerd, whatever you want to call it, since as far back as I can remember, for sure.
So take me back to that first time you went to movie theater to see a Star Wars movie. What was your experience? What do you remember? What was your takeaway from Star Wars? Because for me, I remember I didn't want to leave the theater. I was so enamored with it.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You know, when I went there, we were a little bit late because my family was kind of dragging behind, and they wanted to get, the popcorn and the candy and all that. And I just wanted to get inside. And when we did, it had the beginning scroll already happening, and I was standing in the aisle looking at it, and I didn't want to go sit down, right? And so like my mom had to force me to go sit in my seat because I didn't want to miss anything. And I watched the movie all the way through until all the credits rolled and the lights came up. And I didn't want to leave. And then it blew my mind, really, because as a kid I thought I didn't, at the time I didn't know how things were made. I'm thinking that, oh, there was a such thing as a tauntaun. Where do you find them? Where on the planet did they wrangle these things and get them to be in? So yeah, no, it blew my mind.
So getting into things with that, coming full circle to having that experience, getting a chance to be in Star Wars, how did that all come about? Like, I know that you've had a career, obviously, for quite some time in the effects and makeup world, but how did it come into you being a performer and getting into Star Wars? What was that conversation like, and how did it begin for you?
I mean, because I worked with Robert before, and Robert is good friends with Greg Nicotero, who I knew very well. They were kind of having conversations, and Greg mentioned my name, and Robert was like, "Oh, that's right," and he remembered that I had worked with him on Predators.
Yeah.
So then Robert gave me a call, and he and I started talking, and he was like telling me about the character and not fully disclosing what it was because I hadn't signed anything yet. So he just, I mean, he knew it was a Wookiee, but I didn't know what the name of the character was or anything like that. But someone asks you to be in Star Wars, you just say yes. You don't really ask too many questions. You just say, okay, I'm going to do it.
Whatever you want me to be.
That really was it. I didn't want to ask too many questions because at the time I was like, if I ask too many questions, they might say, no. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. But yeah, he was just telling me kind of like, you got to be physical. He has to fight. He has to do this. And I'm like, it can't be Chewbacca because Chewbacca's not a fighter. So I don't know where my mind was, but like I said, it was just they said Star Wars, and I said yes, basically. And then I had to send him my info and a reel and all that, and then he had to run it by John, and then they had to run it all the way up the flagpole, and that was nerve-wracking because I had to wait for a bit after the audition and whatnot, and I had to wait for a while. And for a while, I kind of convinced myself I hadn't heard from anybody, and I thought, it was cool, but it's going to go away. And like I think a few weeks later, I got a call from Colin, one of the producers, and he called me up and was like, hey, as if they had made a decision, and they were like, oh, wait a minute, did anybody tell Carey? Like that was kind of the conversation. It was like, hey, so when you start, we got to do this, and you got to make sure you plan for this and that. And I'm like, I got it. I'm on the last, So yeah, no, it was like a month or whatever.
Yeah.
Before I fully knew that it was happening.
Looking at your body of work, you've had multiple opportunities to work with Robert Rodriguez over the years. And so I figured there was a connection there to be made, and it certainly does sound that way. And of course, your role on Walking Dead, Greg Nicotero, and those guys all being around each other. Looking at how this all came about there, as you mentioned, you had to wait a long time. Once you got it, what was this thought like, having that kid that went to go see Empire Strikes Back? What was going through your mind that I'm in Star Wars now? Like, you've been around Hollywood productions for a lot of years, but what's it like to realize that you're in Star Wars?
Honestly, I don't know, because I haven't come to grips with it yet. I really haven't. I mean, it's a weird thing. Like, I don't, I did my first as Krrsantan a few weeks ago, and it just still doesn't feel real. It's kind of an out of body experience. So I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think I've come to grips with it yet. I truly haven't. It's like the I haven't had that conversation with the 8-year-old, 9-year-old me yet. I think if I did, it'd probably be like this. It'd probably be an explosion. And I go, what?
Well,
but it's cool. Listen, the reality is, all jokes aside, it's super cool. It's full circle. It's a dream come true. It's all those things. It's absolutely all those things.
Well, it's such a cool production too. A lot of really big, heavy hitters are involved with it. Obviously, when Lucasfilm comes calling, you say yes, like you said. You're like, yes, let's just go forward with this. But what was it like working with these different creatives? Was there stuff that you noticed them? You've been around many, many creatives in Hollywood for a lot of years, but what is kind of the thing that stands out to you amongst, the Jon Favreaus and Robert Rodriguez and Dave Filoni being involved with everything as well? What did you see from them as far as what they bring to set and their styles that they like to put into things?
Honestly, it's more about, like, in terms of Jon and Dave Filoni. It's for me, it was more about, every time I do a project or work with people. I mean, I did work with Jon on one other project many, many moons ago, but indirectly. But whenever I work with people like that for the first time, I'm more of like a fly on the wall. I just listen, So a lot of the times it was when I was on set with his, especially Jon, is just listening to his ideas and how he comes up with the scenes and scenarios. Because everything that they shot, every scene, everything was methodic, and everything had a back history with it. So like if we were shooting a scene, and he'll literally would sit next to me, and he would say, okay, this is what happened, and this is why it happened, and I always think about, and he'll go off onto this story of how he came up with this scenario, like movies that he liked.
That's
he always
cool.
said movie references of like, either a Western or a gangster film or stuff like that. And he would talk about that moment in that movie. Like, like when so-and-so felt this in that moment, this is what we're trying to, bring to this. And he would just go, and I could sit and listen, if literally, if they called me to set and said, Jon and Dave want to talk to you, and I would have just been like, cool, I'll, don't give me a call. I'll just come and I'll sit and they can talk and I'll listen. Because their story, there's like a literal wealth of knowledge that those guys have about Star Wars, but just movies in general, and a lot of the sort of source material in terms of like style and ideas, are movies that I love too. Like Western, I grew up watching Westerns and gangster movies and kung fu movies and all that.
Oh, yeah.
That's my sort of youth as well, in terms of, so every time they mentioned a movie, I was like, oh my God, that's one of my favorites. So I would know the reference. One of the references, I think it was even in the script, was from Apocalypse Now, and I knew the reference, and so anyways, yeah, I think that was what I was in awe of just their knowledge and their references and just how they develop the characters and the scenes and all that. And I just would sit back and listen, and use that to my advantage to put that into my sort of knowledge of, so that when I do another film or another project or another character, use that how I can develop those things as well.
They've obviously made an impression on people, right, Nate? Because, so many of the people that we've talked to, they all say very similar things in terms of how Jon and Dave work and their creative process. And, obviously they're teaching as much as they are doing anything else, it seems, showing people like, this is our approach. And I think that's really cool.
I love the visual cues too.
You hit the nail on the head, teaching 100%. And you don't get a lot of that. A lot of times you'll do projects where they're like, okay, which I've done. And it was like, okay, go from here to there. And you're like, okay, but why am I going there? I just, I'm putting the camera here and just do it. And you're like, okay, but what?
Yeah.
And so you're kind of lost trying to find, the motivation and like the intensity or not intensity or why you're doing, and then a lot of times it would be you just don't, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but they did a really, 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 really good job at that, front loading you with all that knowledge so that in the scene why you're doing it, so that you can be in the right mindset, in the right sort of in the right motivation to do whatever it is that you're doing. So at no point, no matter what I did in Boba Fett, at no point was I sitting there prior to them yelling action and saying, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Where am I? What is this? Which I've been there. I've been in projects where they yell action, and right before my anxiety is high, because I'm like, is this the right intensity? Am I?
Yeah.
What's coming up before this or after? I don't know, because it's shot out of order sometimes. So you're trying to figure out, like, wait a minute, what did I do before this? Why am I like, is it, so, but they did a really good job. They did an extremely good job at that, front loading you with as more information actually than you would need to so everything kind of flows together. And Robert just being Robert being the visionary that he is, he knows, he stitches everything together in his mind already. Like he knows every shot, it's like he knows. So when you ask him something, he has an answer. It's not like he's trying to find it. It's like, okay, and he knows where the camera wants to be. He knows how to shoot it to where you look the best. And I mean, they have a really great productive team of people that I think just makes that show, for me anyways, such an amazing and fun experience.
Let's talk about that mindset. I'd love to hear about your first experience. You're in the Krrsantan outfit and you're around Jon Favreau. I've heard something about you going method at that point when you first encountered him with it and letting him know what you were going to bring to the character. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, I think it was more of like out of fear, really. I think it was out of fear of them, in this little vulnerable moment. But I think it was out of fear of like being a fake, I come out and then they see it for the first time and they're like, oh, well, maybe we made a wrong decision, or this guy doesn't have any intensity, or look at how he's standing, look how he's walking, and you can blow a character real easy if you don't have the right person doing it, and so it was just a lot of that I felt, and just the fact that Star Wars is such a beloved property, that the fans are just so intense in terms of, if you do it right, they love you. But if you do it wrong,
even if you do it right, they still hate you.
And that's for the rest of your life. So anyway, so it was really out of fear that I wanted to walk in there, and I want everybody, not just Jon, but everybody that was the producer, everybody else, Colin and Dave Filoni and the other actors, I wanted everybody to look at him when they saw him for the first time to be like, oh my God, okay, like that's real. That's the real thing. It's really Krrsantan. I see intensity. I see, all that. And so that's kind of, so anyway, yeah. So that first day that, Robert and I had time to work together on that previous to the first moments that we kind of showed everybody else. So I would, Robert and I would talk on the phone, and then, I think the first few fittings, he would text me and tell me stuff. And then we had an initial fitting where, they wanted to see it and lighting scenarios. And they were still sort of working out sort of the armor stuff. And we kind of worked a few things out there previous, you know, and I would kind of, you know, show him something I was thinking, and he'd say he liked that, or maybe change that. So he was really, really helpful in kind of honing in on kind of what worked and what felt right and what didn't. And so by the time we did that first kind of broad sort of reveal of him to everybody else, you know, I felt like he was fairly dialed in. And yeah, I didn't talk to anyone that day. I kind of went to Legacy Effects, who did all the amazing artwork on it and constructed him. I basically went to those guys and I said, listen, I love you guys, but I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to really talk to anybody. I said, no disrespect to anybody, but I want this to be him. I don't want them to see Carey. I want them to see Krrsantan. So I didn't really, I didn't talk. People would come up to me that knew that was me, and they'd say, hey, Carey, and I wouldn't say anything. I'd turn my back on them and kind of walk away. You know, so I was a little, you know, I tried to be a little intense, and even Steph Green, who's amazing director, she directed this episode 2, the kind of the reveal of him. You know, we talked prior, and then I kind of said to her, I said, listen, that first day on set, I'm gonna kind of come as Krrsantan. I'm not gonna be as Carey, I'm gonna come as Krrsantan. So if, you know, I kind of stay in that world, you know, you're great, but that's just the first day anyways. That's how I want to play it. And she understood too, like, listen, all these people are professionals. They've been around the block and they understood it. But I think in my mind, it's like I said, it was out of fear. I just didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want anybody to look at him and see me kind of standing weird, you know, out of character. Like, that's Krrsantan?
That's not the way a Wookiee would stand.
I've been waiting to see this dude live action for like all this time, and then that's how he's going to stand. Like, you know. So I wanted to have everybody to have a great impression that first time they saw it, and then after that, it was like, you know, then I was good after that.
So man, did you know, like, Krrsantan? Like, did you know the character before you were approached for the role, or did you have to bone up?
No,
like...
I didn't actually. Just like most, you know, obviously Chewbacca was my dude, and didn't really, and there wasn't really. I mean, you had little glimpses of Wookiees here and there, like quick blurbs and like the prequels, but nothing that was like a Wookiee as a main character, other than Chewbacca. So this is, and that's the other, again, all these things that I thought about previous to doing this, you know, all the things that I put on my shoulders, but no, I didn't. So when it was mentioned to me, and it's the first time that I talked to Robert, and he just said Wookiee. He didn't say his name. So I thought I didn't know who it was. I thought it was Chewbacca, and I was like, wait a minute, but Chewbacca's he's not like a warrior. Like, what? So I didn't know. So I didn't know who he was until like way later. Until actually, because also too, they're very secretive, you know.
Right.
They don't really, you can't really see anything. They don't really send you full scripts or scripts whatsoever, really, until it's like the finished script. You don't get like pre-production drafts. You don't get anything. And then once more, you only get like your scenes too. So it took a while for me to get scripts. So I didn't see any scripts for months. I didn't see the character itself for months. And the first time I really figured out who he was is when I went from one of my first fittings at Legacy, and I saw the sculpture there, and I said, okay. And then John Rosencrantz actually told me his name, and I said, oh, okay. And then I had to then I went and figured it, you know, and researched it and said, wow, this dude, okay.
Yeah.
And I was able to get all that, but it was a while before I knew even who he was and his name, and to be able to do that process of the research, and before that, the only information I got from Robert was just be prepared to do a lot of stunts and fight. You know, for he said you'll probably be fighting for 90% of it, and then 10% it'll be kind of emotional stuff, but for the most part you'll be mean and fighting the whole time. So I just started training. I said, all right, if anything, at least I can do that. So I just started training for months. I started in And then, like I said, once I started getting the scripts and so some of the scenes like the Garza's place and all that, and you know, where there was emotional shift, and then when I, you know, when I got captured and set free. So there's different other emotional shifts that I had to deal with too. After I got the scripts, I was able to kind of again work that out in my mind. But yeah, it was definitely a research for me because I had no idea who he was.
Yeah, so it's kind of an obscure character, but like a real fan favorite. Like, you know, for those that do know the character. So that's cool.
It is. And once I did the research, I didn't know how much, which added to my excitement. I didn't know how much he was loved. Like, I mean, just doing the research online, and just the fact that he had graphic novels and comic books and just a whole following, you know, just a ginormous following previous to him even being one stitch of live action on Boba Fett. You know, there was there was like, you know, Facebook pages and Instagram pages and TikTok, like all the stuff previous to any of this, you know, which was crazy. Like, it was really, really crazy. It was intense to kind of, you know, look all that up.
When you're looking at the intensity of this, you definitely delivered on Black Krrsantan. That was something like universally everyone was just enthralled with, and in the expressiveness you had going on, which has got to be super difficult when you've got all this sort of stuff on you at that point. But your eyes were so expressive, and then on top of that, I was curious, how much control did you have over the face with the prosthetics and with the you know, all the effects going on? How much control did you have with that?
100%. It was 100% me. I mean, Legacy came up with this amazing system where you know, where that was my mouth and it was my, you know, when I would make the brows move, that was me.
Nice.
You know, motivating that by the expression of my own face. You know, and the first day that I went to their shop and it was before they had that stuff working, but they were just trying to make sure it fit and testing their things out. Like, I literally just sat there with my arm crossed and I just was staring in the mirror for, I don't know, I was there like for hours, and while they were doing their thing and they were apologizing, dude, I'm so sorry, you know, I didn't mean to have you in the shop this long. And I said, dude, it's fine. Like, the more time that I spend in this thing staring at myself, the more I kind of mesh to it and become one. You know, the more time you spend in that thing and wear it, the more it becomes part of you. And that's the thing about wearing stuff like that. A lot of times people will put stuff on and it's not, probably not making sense, but it's not part of them, right? You have to act as if that's you. You have to act as if that hair is yours. You have to act as if those hands are yours, feet are yours. But a lot of times people won't move normally. They look stiff and they feel like, you know, they're. So anyways, I would go there, we would do fittings, and I would just sit for hours and hours and hours with it on while they were doing their thing. And it would help me just stare at myself and turn my head certain ways and look, you know, when I would, okay, if I tilt my head down and look to the right, you know, I see my eyes more, or if I, you know, look up, and it was just that. I would just stare in the mirror while they were doing their thing, and I would just tilt down, I'd tilt to the left, I'd tilt to the right, I'd look up, I'd look down, I'd move the brows up or down and figure out what's the best way to kind of get sort of a feeling out. And that was imperative to everything that you saw on camera. If I didn't have that time with them, it would have never came through that way. I'd have been figuring that stuff out as the cameras were rolling. And so you would have saw, you know, half of the episodes looking one way, then the rest looking another way when I figured it out, you know. So having that time with those guys and being able to sit and stare at myself and do that was imperative, I think.
Now, this character is so different from Chewbacca, obviously. I mean, this is a gladiator, a warrior. I mean, he's a fighter. So what are the things that you most focused on when you were going through and preparing yourself for this role, and what you knew about him once you finally got the whole download on what this character is?
I think I think just creating an attitude, his attitude in my mind, you know. So I kind of I kind of tried to find different things and different people. I mean, really, it's just anger. It's just having that intensity and that anger. Really, I mean, and so it was finding sort of, you know, existing motivations, like different different people. Like I watched Conan the Barbarian a lot. I watched Gladiator a lot. And then just in those moments where I had to be intense, just my own anger, you know, and just staying in that intensity, because we would shoot those scenes over days, you know, and 13, 14-hour days wearing that thing. So I had to keep that intensity throughout each day and all day, you know, and even in and out of scenes. So whenever I would do a fight, I had to keep that in, you know, and we would have breaks or whatever. I would be offset for when it wasn't my turn, whatever. I had to keep that intensity, and when I would go back in and continue those fights, so that it felt like it was seamless, right? So if I'm fighting and my adrenaline's going up, and then all of a sudden I break for lunch, or I, you know, I'm not in that shot, so I go sit for a bit, and I come back in and I'm calmer and I'm just going back into it. You'd see that. You'd see how that transition. So it was a lot of mentally just trying to, you know, bring myself back to that anger every time I'd have to go back and do it. So and just keeping that intensity of it. And other times it was real. Like if you're think about it, if you're in that thing, you're fighting, your adrenaline's on 1,000 and it's coursing through your veins, and it's like, and you really feel like you're beating dudes up. And I had to apologize to a couple of the stunt guys because I would literally grab them and throw them and crash them down on shit and keep going through it. And after it's done, I'm like, I go back and and somebody's kind of grabbing their shoulder. And I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, man. It's like I'm just, you know, and they're stunt guys and they're great. I mean, you know, and again, stunt guys, the stunt team was amazing because, you know, they take a lot. Stunt guys I think, don't get enough recognition because they take a lot. Because I literally, and there was no wires, man. There was most of the time, no pads on the ground. So when I'm lifting up those dudes, I'm truly lifting them up off their feet. When I slam dudes on tables, I'm literally raising them up over my head and slamming them on tables. I'm literally throwing them on the ground. I'm literally chucking them across the room. I'm really flipping them off my back onto the ground. And so those dudes they got beat up in real life.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So, and again, to have those dudes go through that and get up and then do a take 2 or 3, I mean, that's impressive. You know, those guys are awesome.
That's dedication. Was it you were mentioning fighting the suit? Was that thing hot? I mean, my day job, I know, like you wear like a lot of gear doing something like that athletic, like it gets pretty warm. It's
got to be warm.
How was it? I mean, like, was it better because it's volume and some of it's inside, or was it still pretty hot to wear that much, you know, that much?
No, it's hot. I mean, you're inside the volume, and with all those monitors, it's actually hotter in there.
Oh, boy. That makes sense.
Gets off heat. I mean, they have a cooling system in it to keep those things, but when we're filming, they have to shut it all off.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So no, it gets hot, and that's the other thing. Listen, you got to know yourself. You got to know how to calm yourself, because ultimately your body, when it gets to a certain level of shock, starts to shut down, and you have to sit there and say, "You're okay, man. You're fine. You're fine. You'll get through it." And that was a lot of it too. It was a lot of pacing, and it was a lot of, you know, I paced a lot, and I walk off and walk back on, or sometimes I just didn't want to take a break, because sometimes when you're in that and you're pushing your body to the limit, and you take a break, again, it's like your body is like, I'm not going back in there. I'm not putting that head back on. I'm not putting that suit back on. So a lot of times I would say, I want to keep it on. I want to stay in it. Because if I take it off, I'm not putting it back on. So a lot of times I would just be sitting on set, just with everything on, just sit there and trying to calm myself that way while I have it on. I'm overheated and I'm tired and something hurts and my shoulder hurts, but I know that if I take that off for any amount of time, it's going to be like, I don't want to put it back on.
Don't want to put it back on. Yeah.
No, because it's not necessarily, right? It's not necessarily me. It's just my body. It's my body.
Yeah.
Like, I'm released. I'm not going back.
Free.
Yeah. So a lot of times they're like, "Hey man, you can take it off," and I'll say, "No, I'll just let me sit here." They're like, "Dude, it's a boiling." I know, but it's just I gotta stay like this. I have to, otherwise, you know. So just that comes with experience and knowing how far you can push yourself, and how when you know you've hit a wall, and just the longevity, because you don't want to be the reason why you got to stop shooting or
sure
shot or whatever. So it's intense. It can be intense for sure.
That's a lot of pressure on you too, because you do have so much more going on with an outfit like that, with all the, just the weight of it. And then on top of that, the heat, and you talk about the lights, the conditions. It's a lot of pressure to make sure that you're not the guy that shuts down the production for that moment.
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah, and and with that said, though, I think they would be understanding. I mean, I don't think that if I did say, "Hey, I need more than 5," like they would be understanding. I mean, but I think for my own ego, honestly, let's be real. For my own ego, I think that I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that.
You had kind of a cool moment that transpired, if I've read this correctly, that you had the chance to interact with Angie Mayhew, Peter Mayhew's wife, and she put out a very cool kind of welcome to being a Wookiee, and that her husband helped, make an iconic thing. It's so cool to have that kind of interaction going on. But did you get a chance to talk with her before you actually started performing the role?
No, I didn't actually.
Okay.
That happened after. It was yeah, no, I wasn't expecting it. And I didn't even see it. Like I think someone showed it to me. I think Howard or somebody was like, "Hey, did you see this?" It was like, because I mean, I just literally actually started Instagram a few months ago, but yeah, somebody else showed it to me, and they were like, "Hey, did you see this?" And I'm reading it, and I'm like,
"It's so
holy
cool.
crap.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool." I didn't know that they even cared or paid attention, and so I think I reposted it, and then I think a few weeks later, I get a text message, and it was like, "Hey, this is I'm calling on behalf of Angie, and she would like to talk to you." And I'm like, really? And so we talked, and I thought it would just be a quick thing, but we talked for over an hour, and it was a sweet conversation. She's an extremely nice lady, and she's very, very, very supportive. It was unexpected. It was very, very cool. It was very, very cool.
Yeah. Well, working with the various folks, what stands out to you about, from the episodes, the directors that you're working with? You talked about Steph Green earlier, and I know that from having talked to one of the actors on the show for that second episode, the second chapter that she directed, part of that time she had to direct via FaceTime because she was under protocols at that point because of COVID. But working with different directors, was there something that kind of stood out to you as just something that was kind of fun, or you thought that stood out by that's a little different way to approach this?
Well, Steph Green, who actually I worked with on Watchmen, but she was pregnant. She was pregnant, and she was there. She was actually, well, when I shot my stuff, she was on set. Yeah. Like, she was on set, and she did her thing, man. She killed it. But she's awesome. And of course I have affinity for it because she shot the episode that revealed me, right? So and I think, and she did a really good job. I loved her instincts and her angles and her notes and all that. She's great. But Robert's awesome because he knows how to shoot action, right? And he knows how to you're doing more than maybe what you are doing.
Yeah.
So she's great. Robert's great. He'll tell you. He'll literally say, like, when you come across here, this is where I'm putting it. Like, and he'll show you where he's thinking about putting the camera. He'll tell you, like, when you come across like this, because and I'm going to shoot at this frame rate, and I'm going to do X, Y, Z. So he's super good at that. And he shot most of Kevin shot some of the episode where we were in Garso's place, but Robert shot a lot of the other fight scenes, and he really guided me in terms of what would look the best and put the camera in the right areas, and when I would do something, he would say, he would reinforce that and say, "Dude, that's great, do that again."
What's the iconic moment for your character that you think stands out? Like I mean, is it the fact that you ripped some guy's arms off? What was the thing about playing that character where you think like, that's my, that's my moment right there. That's what it was, because the character was so universally beloved by the fandom. Like it was a big welcome reaction from the fandom on this character.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was because how many times did we hear that sort of phrase, about Wookiees ripping arms out, and that's the first time you actually see it, on camera, and it happens. And I think, and that's the one thing that most people will point to, and it was like, dude, we saw it. You actually ripped an arm, like. So it would probably be that. It'd probably be just ripping someone's arm out, ripping a Trandoshani's arm out, and then fighting the Trandoshans too. So yeah. I think, just because of the back history of like Wookiees and Trandoshans, I think, and those sort of Star Wars fans that know that back history,
they don't like each other.
Nope.
Big time. And to see it, and to physically see it, and I think just that vulnerable moment that Krrsantan was having after being betrayed and not having a purpose, and to be in that emotional state and then see those guys. So already he's in an emotional state, and he sees these guys sitting over there having fun that he also hates.
Yeah, I
think that was like a poignant moment that I think that was also great, and then again ripping an arm off. So I think that scene was pretty sticks out the most, I think.
Yeah,
guys, for sure.
I'm going to look at more of the other parts of his career here. There's any more Krrsantan questions you want to ask here real quick?
I think I'm good. Go cover some of the other stuff.
Yeah, well, I want to get into this because you have such an interesting career, and I want to go down that path a bit. Let's go down this. You've worked with some of the greats. Like, I mean, we talked about Greg Nicotero, Stan Winston, Rick Baker, and so many others that we know for their work in effects and makeup. And I heard you mention in a past interview that it was watching the old Superman TV show with George Reeves, which I remember from back in the day, that your curiosity kind of first started. And so how did you go from that kid in Pittsburgh to working on Hollywood sets? Like, what was that journey? When did you get to California and start doing all this stuff? And how did that all happen?
It was naivety, really. I mean, I just one day just decided that I was going to drive out and give it a shot. Didn't really have a ton of opportunity in Pittsburgh. A lot of the movies at that point stopped filming there. And so, yeah, I think I was 19, and I just decided to just pack it all up and head out west, And then when I got here, it was like, just the determination of not having to make that phone call that, all right, it didn't work, and I'm coming back. So the moment I hit the ground here, I just would drive up and knock on doors, and it was a job. I literally would write down my list of places that I would need to go visit, and I would write down conceivably how many I could visit in a day. And so I'd drive up, and I'd go to one place, cross that off the list, another place, and I'd drive back home, and I'd write my new list for the next day. Then I'd drive up, visit. And I did that for a solid week and a half, maybe even 2 weeks. I did it until finally it paid off. I got one phone call and worked there, and then another phone call. So slowly that week of knocking on doors and not really getting responses started to slowly trickle in. So after 2 weeks, I got one job, and then that job, literally, I got another phone call from another place, and then I went to work there, and then another one, and another one. They all just slowly started to call me, and then after that, it was just word of mouth. I would work at one place, and then another place was hiring, and then they would say, "Oh, well, hire this guy." So I kind of weaved my way in that, and then after that, it was strategic. I got to the point where there were certain places that I wanted to work for, because again, I wanted to learn from the best. So it was like, I want to work for Rick Baker. So I, waited until a window opened there, and I called them and said, hey, when they needed some people, because there was actually, they were shooting a movie called Godzilla, Pactatopolis, and everybody wanted to work on it. So people were migrating out of the main shops and moving down there. And I said, well, wait a minute, if everybody's quitting to go to there has to be opportunities at all these shops we were leaving from. So I called them. Instead of following the bandwagon, I kind of called the places that they were leaving to where I wanted to work. So I said, hey, you know, oh, guess what? We lost 5 guys. So yeah, we need you. So then I was able, that's how I started working at Rick Baker's, and then I met more people and worked for Stan. So it was strategic. It was really trying to figure out where I wanted to go, what I wanted to learn, who I wanted to kind of meet, you know. And in terms of K&B, that was less strategic, because honestly, I had met Greg just at social events a few times. I mean, we didn't really know each other. It was me being a fan saying, hey, Greg Nicotero. And he was like, hey, what's up? And that was it, right?
Yeah.
But I met him a few times previous to that. And then I was finishing up. I was on set, actually, for Terminator 3. And a guy, Jeff, that I worked with was like, hey, you know, I just got hired over at K&B. And it was like, at that point, it was like a place that I tried several times to get work at, and it just never happened. And so I kind of was like, I'm never going to work there. That's not going to happen. And I had already worked at Stan's and Rick's, but for some reason, just whenever I would try to get in there, it just was never hired. And so Jeff talked to Greg, and Greg was like, oh yeah, I know who you are. And I called Greg, and he hired me sight unseen. Really, he was like, oh yeah, no, I remember you. Come on down. And he was like, can you start tomorrow? I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And I was there. I've been there since.
How much fun is it working on a series like The Walking Dead? Because I mean, you earned an Emmy there and multiple nominations. What's it like? And also when you're looking, because that's a show that's its effects are all encompassing with what's going on there. It's a big focus on that for that show. But what are the challenges of that show for you?
It honestly, the challenge with that show and any TV show is just time.
Yeah,
sure. And it gets more and more difficult, but because you always want to do a great job, you know. I mean, that show has been so great in terms of the amount of work we've been able to do and the quality of work we've been able to do. I mean, a lot of that stems from, Greg always wanted to push it further than it's been pushed before on TV. There's a lot of things, you know, it's stuff that usually should be reserved for a film, you know, but he has these cool ideas, and I'm always on board. I'm like, I'll give it a shot. I'm always up for. I'm never the type of person that when an idea comes across, you know, my desk, or he spits it out, and I'm like, and try to talk him out of it. I try to talk him into it more, and I'm like, let's figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. And
because a lot of them are great ideas. Some of them maybe just for time's sake we can't do, but for the most part, you know, it's I'm always on board because they're just great ideas. And so, you know, the makeup artists that are on set and you know, in the shop, and the team that we have trying to make all this come together, it's a lot of work, you know, and just constructing these things and turning them around in enough time and getting them out there and just following through. But it's a tough show. I mean, it's a really, really tough show because there's a lot involved that happens from concept to creation. I mean, it's a lot of steps, a lot of things that make it look so cool. I mean, when you see it on the television screen and all that, you know, and the fans see it, they're like, that's great, but there's like there's so much that goes into all that stuff. And that's why it looks so good. That's why it looks so good, because everybody loves it, and everybody cares. Everybody wants it to look great, and everybody loves the response of the fans when they see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems like we're really starting to break down some of those barriers too, especially back to Star Wars. But, you know, the TV versus movies thing, you know, so much of what was originally only reserved for the big budget, you know, movies were kind of starting to infiltrate in more and more as we get better at doing productions and stuff. And it's very interesting to hear you bring that up. Just seems like it's a good fit for what we're doing with the volume and everything else. So
yeah, and in the budgets in there's so many streaming services now. Like, I imagine the demand is growing because you look at the success of Game of Thrones, and the budgets just have been soaring ever since. And so that's like drawing in this sense of, well, if we're, you know, doing this, we need to really do it. So I imagine for your world, it's pretty interesting to see how much that stepped up the game from the early days of television to where we're at today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think in terms of what is being asked for 100%. I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of the things, because we've been able to create them. And listen, I personally like to say that, you know, Walking Dead was the spirit to a lot of that, you know, because previous to Walking Dead, you weren't doing
Yeah.
a lot of the things that you see
Mhm.
nowadays, because conceivably people thought you couldn't in that
Yeah.
in that amount of time, you know. And a lot of the trickery that we, you know, that we did, and a lot of like I said, a lot of the ideas that Greg came up with to translate what Robert Kirkman did into real life. You look at some of those drawings in the graphic novels, some of those panels in the graphic novel,
Mhm.
and you're like, how the heck can you translate that to real life on TV, on that budget, on that time
Mhm.
frame? We did it. You know, we did
Yep.
it. And some of those, we literally did it, you know, matching those panels.
Yeah.
It literally, we would have meetings, and a lot of times when they did pull a page right out of the graphic novel, we would look at those panels direct. And it would say, okay, you see how this goes this way, and this is this, and this is that. We would literally match those panels direct. And it was a combination between a ton of practical effects. We did do some visual effects, like a bicycle girl.
Uh-huh.
That was practical, and some visual, erasing her legs. But it takes that mindset. It takes that mindset as being a problem solver, and also too, to be willing to go for the ride, you know, and just say okay.
Yeah.
Because like I said,
Yeah.
a lot of people, when ideas come across, it's like they like to think of how it can't be done, you know, or why it can't be done. Like, but like Greg, like I think the opposite. I look at something, I'm like, okay, so how do we do that? How do we, you know, instantly? It's not about why it can't be, it's how we
Mhm.
can.
Yeah.
And I think it takes people like that to really, you know, push the envelope and to kind of, you know, bring crazy, amazing things for especially for television.
Digital is so useful, obviously, and it's cool to see what you can do digitally, but practical, just like, I don't know what it is about it, but practical just sells it. Like, it just,
Yeah.
there's nothing better than great practical effects. And that's one of the things I've enjoyed so much over the years, and specifically when you look at The Walking Dead and
Mhm.
what you're doing
Yeah.
for Krrsantan. Again, I go back to the expressiveness. That is the thing that stood out to me the whole time watching, is just how expressive you were and how effective that was, because I wasn't thinking there's a guy in the suit right there. I was like, I lost myself.
Mhm.
That whole thing, it made it real for me, and I just love that. So very cool. Going
Thank
from
you.
Yeah, of course. Well, going from that side of
Absolutely.
the camera, I'd love to know your role behind the camera. What are you doing as a supervisor for the effects and for everything that's going on? What are you responsible for when you're taking on that kind of a role?
Everything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. I mean, you know, a lot of times I'm the liaison between what happens on set and what happens in our studio. Other times I'm responsible for what happens from the productions, what they want, translating it to what we can build in the shop, and then I go to set, and I'm on set too, applying and following through on that end, all the while still managing, you know, a lot of the other projects that we have going on there. So it's a lot. I mean, you know, so we get, in terms of Walking Dead goes, you know, Greg will have these ideas. We'll have a production calls and make effects calls, and then he and I usually will have our separate phone call and trying to work out kind of what it is they want, how we do it, and then it's just my job to go into the shop and basically, you know, manage that, you know, figure out time frames, and sometimes we have to figure out more efficient ways of doing things. I mean, we may have done something a certain way for 20 years, but now because it has to be done in half the time, I have to
Mhm.
come up with the idea to kind of still, you know, cut that time shorter, but also come up with the same quality at the end of the day, which is tough. And then, like I said, other times it's like for Watchmen, for instance,
Mhm.
you know, I dealt directly with Damon Lindelof and production, and
That show is incredible. Yeah.
and did you know, tested the shop, and then I went to set, and was on set for that. So in Atlanta, so it varies, but ultimately, you know, the responsibility is a lot, you know,
Yeah.
because the reality is that when it doesn't work, it's your fault,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
When it does work, it's because of everybody else.
Yep. The burden of leadership.
Well, it is. It's everyone. Everyone has a
because,
role.
It's because somebody else had a great idea. Somebody else did this, da, da, da.
Yep.
When it doesn't work, it's what did you do, right?
Yeah.
So like it's just that sort of sort of pressure you kind of put on you, but it's just the nature of the beast. You choose to do it or not. I mean,
yeah.
You can, I could have decided that I didn't want to be, a department head or a supervisor or whatever. I didn't have to, but I wanted to because I think I'm good at it.
Definitely are. And Kerry, I want to take you back to those movies and different projects you watched back in the 80s and the 90s before you were actually working this. Is there anything from those days, any project or property that you'd like to see made today, or a sequel that you would want to see the quality of the effects of today's technology and take it there? Is something that you kind of remember from your childhood or from those early days that you would like to see made today?
Well, see, this is the answer to that question that is very true to my soul. I don't want any 80s movie redone. It drives me nuts. Because quite frankly, I have affinity for all those movies, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that they can be. And the reason why they're as good as they are back then is because that was the nature of what was being made in that moment. And in trying to recreate that, it just doesn't work. It did for me anyways. There might be fans that might say, hey, the recreation of Nightmare on Elm Street, was amazing. But for me, it wasn't, because the original one was so great. Even the Predator movies. I was in one.
Yep.
But the original one was the best one. It was the best one. And those subsequently after, I think, to some degree failed. But and same with Terminator. I worked on a Terminator movie.
Yeah.
The first and second one were amazing.
Yep.
And my fear is that to redo it will destroy it, right?
Yeah.
And it'll take what I love so much as
Yeah.
a kid and put sort of a stain on it. So it's like I don't touch it.
Treat it with reverence.
It's like
Yes.
they redid the thing, and I refuse to see that movie because like the original one was so amazing, and it's like I don't want to see it because it may stain that for me, So it's like create something new, create a new genre, which I think we've done, right? Because in that moment when you had the thing, you had all of John Carpenter movie, Halloween, Friday, like they created that genre. And then there was that time where it was like the 90s, where it was like Kevin Williamson with Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer and all that, which those were great movies.
Flipped it.
And that was that moment.
Yeah.
It's like now someone has to create a new, and then there was like, what was it? It was like I know they're making more and more, but when Annabelle came out, there was a lot of movies that were like in that.
Conjuring,
so now it's like instead of trying to create a new genre, everybody's going back and saying, oh, let's just make sequel 7 to this because we already have a fan base, or let's make, but see, I will go back and I will kind of poo-poo my own sort of statement that I just made, because I do want more Star Wars stuff.
Oh, of course.
That's the only genre I will give a pass to, because they have made some great Star Wars movies since the originals, in my opinion. There's some that I love, that have come out. But that's the only one that I give a pass to. All the rest of it.
Well, we're hoping we get more Black Krrsantan in the future. I know you can't say anything about that for the future because that's the nature of things, but we are ready for it. I know the fan base is ready for it. We appreciate you joining us so much for this time. I do want to ask you if there's anything coming up that we can look forward to you at this point, whether it's behind the camera or you're performing on. Is there any projects that you can share at this point?
Not specifically. There is a Marvel project that's coming up.
All right.
And then there's and we have stuff for KNB, that TV shows that we're kind of working on. That Howard's working on. We're doing Interview with a Vampire. That's as a series that KNB's doing, and then and then we have we did Dexter, which
coming back.
Yeah, we did that for Showtime, and of course we have new Walking Dead series that are spinoffs that we're working on, and so there's a ton of stuff in that regard too. There's other stuff that I personally have, like I said, the Marvel thing, but I can't disclose anything. You know,
Sure.
I want to sit here and promote everything, but until
we gotta
until
wait.
It's announced or see it, I you know, that's all I can say.
All right. Well, we appreciate you so much. And also, before you go, we ask every guest 7 quick questions about Star Wars. And it's just about your own perspective. I'll ask you the question and you give me the first thing that pops in your head. It's kind of rapid fire, if that's cool with you.
Okay.
So here we go. You're hanging out in a space cantina. Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Krrsantan.
Yeah, of course you are. All right. You've got a lightsaber. What's your color?
Wow. It would be red.
Red. Okay. Nice. Go on the dark side of things. Do you have a favorite quote? And do you mind sharing it if you
Only
do?
because of Mr. Krrsantan, he's too angry to have a blue one.
That's true. He's not a good guy. So do you have a favorite quote and what is it?
Yeah, actually it's there is no try, there's only do. Because it's so poignant and very true.
Yep, that fits. You are a tenacious person, just looking at how your career started. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. And it rings true for you. I love that.
It does,
you're a pilot. What's your starship?
Wow. You know, I honestly, which I think I want to make it happen, even if it's just me kind of messing around on set. If that ever happens, is that I gotta fly X-wing, man.
Yeah,
you gotta fly X-wing. And it's funny because when we were shooting, I saw one sitting on set. It's like, and I was so tempted to like just get in it.
Come on, man.
Photographing. Yep. But you know, I don't want to touch anybody else's artwork. But it's like I gotta make that happen at some point.
Are you gonna fit in an X-wing?
Oh, I'll make it fit. Even if my feet are hanging out over the edge of the thing and the canopy's up, it's gonna happen.
So I'm the short guy of this bunch. I'm 6 foot tall, but these two guys you're talking to, one of them actually is a fighter pilot. Chris is actually a fighter pilot in the Air Force. And then how tall are you, Chris?
6'2".
Okay, so you're 6'2", but Jake, you're 6'6", is it, or 6'5"?
6'6".
Okay, 6'6". So
I saw that you didn't like being tall as a kid, man. I was 6th grade. I was already 6'6", and that's hard for me to comprehend, that whole you didn't like being tall thing.
Because you know, just because you're an anomaly. Yeah, I was the only one that was that tall at my age. So everybody's like, oh my God. So then the comments come out, you know, and it's like, you know, how tall are you, or the jokes or whatever, or just like, you know, oh, you play basketball, and it's like, well, you know, I mean, I eventually did play basketball, but I literally did not play because everybody wanted me to play because I was tall. That's it.
I got that question a lot.
And eventually I did play, and I ended up being pretty good. But I took offense to like people saying, "Come on, you be on my team," just because I was like, I could be the worst player in the world, but you want me just because I'm tall. So I just
that was me, the worst player in the world.
I avoided it. I avoided playing basketball up until I was in high school. Until my coach I'll be honest, he pumped me into playing. He was like, "You're going to be that tall. You're going to be an old man talking about, you know, what you could have done, what you should have done."
Gave you the Braveheart speech.
He did. Oh, 100%, 1,000%. If he was on a horse and riding around me, it would have been nice. And I was like, and I fell for it. I was like, "You're right. I'll join the arm."
See, it works, doesn't it?
That's funny.
That is hilarious. Okay. Are you familiar with the Darth Jar Jar theory that fans have pumped out?
Oh, boy.
No.
Okay. So basically, I'll break it down for real quick. So basically, fans have said that Jar Jar, it was all an act. He was actually a Sith Lord. And because he was way too graceful jumping into the water, and he could do all these amazing things, but he was just like a bumbling of screwing things up, that he was really the ultimate evil behind everything. That's the theory. Now that you've heard this, do you think that was worth exploring any further? Or do you think it's all garbage?
No, it was not worth exploring any further. I think people are trying to make sense of a character that was just a little seemed out of place. That's all.
Yeah. All right. Who do you think is the actual true hero of Star Wars?
The true hero of Star Wars?
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Well, I mean, that one.
Well, I mean, I think it, you know, it's always been Luke for me, you know. I mean, you know, because he just throughout the years, I mean, he has that sort of again, it reminds me of, and I think this is probably why a lot of kids, when it came out, had an affinity for it, because, you know, just how I grew up, just looking at the horizon, hoping and wanting to do more and be more, you know, and that can relate to a lot of people, right?
Yep.
You know, they might be in a situation, whether they grew up in, like me, in the inner city or poor, and are looking up and are saying, man, you know, I feel that I'm more than this. I feel that there's more out there for me. And I think that rings true to a lot of people even today. And the fact that he did make it out, he had help, of course, but he did make it out. And I think every single movie, not every movie, but most movies are pulled from relatable, you know, undertones. And I think that Star Wars in every single movie has that sort of underlying, you know, plot, and his just rings so true to a lot of people. And so I always got to stick with Luke Skywalker.
Well, and it's perfect for our generation. On top of that, it's a very aspirational story, and like the inspiration to do more. Yeah, it totally rings true. Okay, so final question: favorite Star Wars movie or series? And it may be obvious considering your role, but we'll let you decide what's the one that like speaks to you most.
I'm gonna be fair, because I was asked this question. So the original trilogy is going to be my favorite, just because it's the first ones that I saw, and nothing will ever touch those. And then again, I would say Mandalorian series, because it set the tone.
Yeah.
Right. I'm always a fan of what comes first. If it was good, that set the tone.
Yeah.
And then of course Boba Fett, because I'm in it.
Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah. My guy, but I have to be fair. Like if it wasn't for the original trilogy, then there wouldn't be anything else. If it wasn't for the Mandalorian, then there wouldn't be any Boba Fett. You know, if the success of the Mandalorian wasn't the way that it was, they wouldn't have made Boba Fett and Kenobi and Ahsoka. They wouldn't be doing any of those.
Yeah. Well said.
I gotta put Mandalorian up there first, and then, like I said, Boba Fett, because I get to
you get to play in the sandbox.
Beat the crap out of some Gamorreans and Trandosians, and got to beat up Boba Fett. You know, so I gotta go with Boba Fett.
It has been a delight to talk to you. Thank you so much for making the time. Thank you, Kerry Jones. We wish you well. We look forward to seeing you on screen and behind the screens, doing all the cool stuff you do with effects. Thank you so much. Wish you well in the future.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.